How do we start these again? I don't remember. It's been a long while. Welcome. We're back from a long break of, college stuff.
Yeah, lots of college stuff. 20 and 21 credit hours.
Lots of stress. Yeah,
Lots of credit hours.
lots of credit hours, lots of stress. But hey, we're here and we're back and we're gonna try and get more of these out. So we just came back from watching Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Yes, we did. A very good break from school.
Yeah, good break from school. Good break from bad comic book movies.
Lots of bad comic book
Yeah.
movies. You said you'd seen Aquaman. I have not seen Aquaman yet.
I did watch Aquaman. Aquaman was, I mean, for a DC movie, it was okay. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, I feel like they leaned a little bit too far into the humor aspect because there were jokes that landed and there were jokes where I was like, okay, you're trying a little bit too hard.
Yeah, sounds about right.
But Aquaman overall was pretty good. I would go see it again.
Fair enough. This one you did go see again. 'Cause
I
you
did.
had seen this one before without me, and then I came and saw it with you again for your second time, and I liked it quite a bit. It's a very good movie.
Oh yeah, I love this movie. Second time going in because it was a nice surprise because I didn't expect this to be a good Spider-Man movie, and not only that, but just a good movie for everybody to watch.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be generic by saying this, but this movie has heart, and I don't mean heart in the sense that it has a lot of emotion because it does, but it also has a lot of humor for humans, and it's a very human, heart-filled movie.
Yeah, it was a very character-centric. It wasn't, well, I guess it was kind of a world-ending plot.
Yeah, yeah.
They kind of glossed over it to the point where it didn't really feel like a world-ending plot. It felt much more like a very personal story for Miles, and even for some of the characters. Well, at least one of the characters that came from the other dimensions. The other ones didn't quite get enough, but
Yeah, no, I think that was kind of a letdown by just having, certain characters come into the Spider-Verse or multiverse, whatever, and then be introduced, and then only have them be introduced slightly, like, Penny Parker, Spider-Ham, and Spider-Man Noir. I mean, they're all great. Like, they have the best jokes in the film, but that's kind of what they're there for, is more or less, is just be the comedic relief, because as much as I love Nicolas Cage, I mean, like, I love him in this movie, but, like, he would have jokes that kind of, like, intruded into the emotional moments, which didn't bother me, but it's just, like, that's what he's there for.
I did like him taking the cube that he didn't understand, but that he had a soft spot
It's
for.
purple. No,
Blue.
blue. I hope he... No, he did finish the Rubik's Cube.
He did,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was his
They
art.
really understood how, but
Yeah.
it's all right. I did find it interesting. They call it Into the Spider-Verse. It's not really Into the Spider-Verse. It's just in
It's just
in his universe,
just
and they're
in-
coming to him.
It's more like Into the Miles verse.
Yeah, and it's more so that they're all coming into his universe, which is a little bit misleading, but you kind of get what you would get from a Spider-Verse movie anyway, other than the different environments, which I think would be cool, could be cool for a sequel
Oh, yeah.
if they were having Miles go out. But at the same time, I feel like Miles is a very grounded character, so if you take him out of his universe, I feel like it kind of loses something
Right.
important. 'Cause
Right.
especially with his family dynamics in this one, which I thought were great.
No, yeah, I loved every single moment he had with his mother, with his father, with his uncle.
Mm-hmm.
My God, like, I feel like I was watching people on the screen, but they weren't people. They were computer animated people, but they were real people.
They
You know
were
what I mean?
gorgeously computer animated
Oh,
people.
yeah. That's another thing, is, like, the animation in this movie is unique, to say the least.
Yeah, very
because
much so.
it goes from being a 60 frames per second type of style, fluid,
Very
flowing.
smooth, and then it'll just go to a slower scene where the things you can see, there's little cuts where they're moving. It's almost
Yeah.
like a stop motion,
Exactly.
but it looks like you're flipping through the panels of like a flip book, which is what
right.
they're kind of going for with it. Which
Yeah, and normally I would, in an animated movie, I would hate that. Like, I hate that kind of inconsistency, but here it just worked.
and they really commit to it, which is also very
Oh,
important. And yeah, it really worked for me, the art style.
This was a comic book movie, like, ripped. Like, it looked like it was filmed in a comic book
Absolutely.
with the panels and stuff. Yeah, it was just great.
I love the way that they did the spider sense. The spider sense was really cool in the beginning, and they eventually kind of back off from it because it would have been kind of overwhelming to have that go through the whole movie. But
Oh yeah, for sure.
the way they had it in the beginning there, with it being like the flashes of color and the speech bubbles and thought bubbles popping up on screen and zooming in on parts of other people, and it was very much a visual representation of it, which is something that they've always had problems actually portraying in movies.
Especially in like the older or the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, because those movies have a lot of comic book elements in there, but it's hard to implement that when it's not an actual comic book movie. It's like, you know, like there are moments in those films where it's like it's filmed like a comic book, but it doesn't necessarily work because it's live action. But for this movie, it totally works.
Yeah, you're kind of having to imply spider sense in a lot of them. It's either that you have to imply spider sense for something that he does that wouldn't make sense otherwise, or it's something where you cut to his face and you can see that he's noticing something before it's there, and then it happens. But having it be represented so visually in this movie was an interesting change, and I liked that.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not something you could do outside of this, because the way they showed it most of the time was just wavy lines by their head. And as much as I would love to be in an MCU movie and just see Spider-Man with little lines popping out of his head, like, oh, that's what that...
Yeah. Oh, that's what it looks like.
As funny as that would probably look, it's probably best if they go with the more show don't tell kind of thing.
For sure. Man, last year was a good year for Spider-Man.
It was a good year for Spider-Man.
A lot of Spider-Man, a lot of Kingpin.
Not so much a good year for the character.
No, yeah, not at all. But
good year for the property.
Yeah, and that's what that's why I love Spider-Man, is because he's a character that gets shit on a lot, but keeps going throughout each and every pound of the ground. He gets back up.
Yeah,
and that's what
they say in the movie too, and they make a big deal out of that. I don't know if you felt this way, but the original Spider-Man in this one, the younger Peter Parker, he felt like a grown-up Tom Holland to me.
Really? Oh, you mean
the grown-up, but the one who dies in the beginning?
Oh, yeah.
The one he was swinging around, yeah. If you've seen the trailers and you see Spider-Man for the first time and you see him as blonde, you realize that's probably not the one that you've seen in the trailers.
Right. Not quite there yet. But.
Yeah, so basically it's when you first get introduced to Peter Parker, it's the one from Miles's universe, and he gets killed by the Kingpin, and then you're introduced to the rest of them through the device that Kingpin was using when Spider-Man gets killed. But you have this little interaction between him and Miles, and it's pretty short. It's just, there's a small lull in the action, and he felt very much like a grown-up Tom Holland to me.
Man, I love that scene because it was just a genuine moment, even though it felt like just the slightest bit, even though it felt the slightest bit rushed, it still worked, and it still was as impactful as I think that they were going for. Yeah. Because, you immediately feel like this camaraderie between these two Spider-Men. Well, not Miles and Spider-Man, but like he, it's like a mentor student type of dynamic between them in those few moments that they had, which is then translated into later on in the film when we meet the other Spider-Man.
Yeah, exactly. There was one thing. I don't know if we want to get into things we thought may have been inconsistent in the movie.
We can. Yeah.
All right, so Gwen Stacy, Spider-Gwen. First off, I'm very, very glad that they didn't lean too far into Spider-Gwen, because she's a very popular character, but this was not her movie. And I'm glad that they stuck with that, because when she first showed up and she was saving the two of the other Spider-Men, and then she was fighting off all those other guys by themselves, I was like, and enter Spider-Gwen, and this is her movie now. And then after that, that faded away and it was back to Miles, and I was afraid that I was going to have to be disappointed in that, but I was not.
Yeah. No, I think the movie does a good job of balancing, or well, not balancing, but like having, balancing all these characters and their, introductions and stuff, and keeping them brief, and then focusing more on Miles.
Yeah,
this is Miles' movie.
It's interesting how they managed to do that, because the way they have like the pretty similar introductions for each of the Spider-Man, where they go back and go through their comic books.
All right, one more time.
It tells you everything you need to know about that character, and then suddenly you're caught up to where they are, and they don't all exactly make sense. Like, unless you know about Spider-Ham, or Peter Porker, you're not gonna quite grasp the concept, but you get it. He's a pig and he's Spider-Man.
He's
there
a pig.
it is.
He's got a mallet.
And so when Gwen is explaining how she came into Miles's universe, she's saying that happened before the whole thing with the hair, because that is actually Spider-Gwen when she is first introduced into the movie. Despite us not seeing her in the suit, it is the same one throughout. However, I don't really understand how the timeline fits there.
I think it was just a line where she said something like, oh, this happened, I transported into this dimension a week before the events that are happening now, or something like that.
Because it was... Oh, okay, no, now I'm thinking, I got them mixed up a little bit. We don't see her until after he gets bit by the spider. Right. Well, no.
Oh, no. We see him...
That's why I was confused, because we see her after he gets bit by the spider, and that's when he gets his hand stuck in her hair. But we see her the day before that as well, and then he goes that night, and then the thing happens with the dimensions, so I'm not sure how she got there before that.
Well, she mentioned that, her spider sense had lured her to that academy, and she didn't know why until I guess Miles... I guess this is when the puberty scene, when Miles walks in the hallway, and then she senses it or whatever, and then that's when she bumps into him.
That makes sense to me, but I'm trying to figure out when we see her in the classroom, when he's sneaking into the class, I don't know how she got there, because the whole thing with the dimensions coming together had not happened yet.
It is a little bit weird, because...
And I don't know if there's something that I'm missing there, or if that's just something that they overlooked.
Yeah, it is strange how she just kind of like, inserted herself into the classroom in the school like in a week prior to the events, and then...
And they're kind of hand wavy with it, and I don't really mind it too much. It's not really something that bothers me, but yeah, that was probably the only inconsistency that I took notice of, and kind of made me think for a little bit in the movie. But yeah, I liked what they did with some of the villains. Yeah. Kingpin looks absolutely fantastic.
Kingpin looks like
he looks like a rectangle.
No, yeah. Wait, no, he looks like the love child of Gru from Despicable Me, and
a rectangle.
Also Tony Soprano.
Yeah. He looks like just a rectangle with a face in like
a circle face.
And it doesn't come above his head. It's not like there's a neck and then a head. It's just
on his chest.
On his chest. And I don't know why I buy it in the universe.
I don't know either.
Because all the other people look totally normal.
They look so normal, and he just looks like a little rectangle face, man. I don't get it, but like, I get it.
But I like it. I like that they did it like that, because we've had a compelling, interesting, gritty, realistic Kingpin. Like this year, even we had Daredevil season 3, which I've still yet to watch, but need to. But we have that character who we know all about Kingpin if you've seen those shows, and his backstory in this one is much more simplified, and I think it works for the film, because
totally.
I don't think they could have possibly captured like the Wilson Fisk that we have in Daredevil, anything close to that in this movie, and had it fit naturally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like where's I going with that? I just feel like I think it works with him being more one-dimensional in this, and I don't really mind him as just this big, brutish bad guy.
I agree. No, I think I think there's a, they don't want to pull the whole oh, we give him a villain and he's villainous type of thing. You want him to have backstory, but they also didn't want to try to even measure up with the Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin, and I think that's fine. Like, I don't think that it's just a thing for me that while watching Daredevil season 3 and then going in to see Spider-Verse, and then I'm like, okay, this Kingpin is obviously weaker than a Kingpin that I'm used to, but it's fine because you know.
And it's like they traded like strong character for apparently just ridiculous strength, which I mean, I guess the comics Kingpin is kind of ridiculously strong, but
No, he's a big boy.
this guy was he was just like punching through whatever he had to, and
leaving cracks on the floor,
leaving cracks in the floor. But yeah, he was entertaining. And then we had Doc Ock, who was, I don't know, is that from the Ultimate Universe? Is Doc Ock a woman in the Ultimate Universe?
As far as I don't know,
Because neither of us are exceptionally familiar with the Miles Morales universe and
that's
what
the
they do
thing.
with him.
I
But
have one of the I think it was volume 4 of Ultimate Spider-Man, and it's just the cover art is Spider-Man being held up against the wall by Doc Ock's arms. I haven't read it, so I don't know whether or not that is Olivia Octavius, but I don't know. I mean,
it looks like not. It
Oh,
doesn't look like
okay.
it. Apparently, in the comics, he is just a guy like he is in the other one, but it didn't take me out of it at all.
No,
that they changed it. They went through it very quickly, and it made sense for what they were doing. And
yeah, I was just
yeah,
like,
I
okay.
just like, yeah, that's Doc Ock. That works. Because she had the same kind of mad scientist vibe that he always has, and yeah, I bought it. I'm like, it worked pretty well, and I think it was. And then they had the moment when he's making his plan, and Spider-Man has the line about how he needs to readjust his own biases when because he's like, oh yeah, the woman is the lead scientist, and he's like, oh, I need to reevaluate my biases. I thought that was a good line in there, and I'm happy with her being a woman just for that line there.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think, no problems here.
And then Scorpion they had in there, who was interesting.
Was whack.
He looked real cool.
He was really cool.
He looked real cool.
He was like,
he had like spider legs.
Yeah, he had like the scorpion legs, and it was weird. I've never seen Scorpion like that. I mean, I've seen him always in a suit and all that, but
and I'm sure there are versions of Scorpion that are closer to that they're drawing from. But yeah, I'd never seen him like that, and I enjoyed that. I think he was just kind of a brute to be there, but yeah, it was kind of nice. And then I don't know who the guy who looks like Frankenstein is supposed to be.
I don't know that either.
I don't know if they say it in here.
When I first saw it, for some reason I thought it was Hammerhead, but
yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't really have any idea as to who he was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But and then we have the Spider-Man that we have in the movie. We had the one in the beginning who dies in the first like 10 minutes of meeting him.
Let's see who plays that Peter Parker. Oh, it's Chris Pine.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, that was a good one. I did like. Oh god, and they they have a scene in his introduction where they do the dance from Spider-Man 3.
I love that.
And it's perfectly recreated, and it's just beautiful.
I love it that it's in the beginning, and it's like it sets the tone of the movie so well. Like oh, I'm in for something really good.
And he's just ripping on his own past self, and it's great.
Man, and Jake Johnson is Peter B. Parker. I love this because it's Jake Johnson always plays like the slobby kind of, I don't know. It's like the slobby guy who just doesn't care most of the time. Like I think what's that show that he's in? New Girl. That's what it is. Yeah, New Girl. And he plays that same character in that show, and it works for. And when I saw him, or when I saw that he was going to be in this movie as Peter Parker, I was like, will that work? I don't know. But I was pleasantly surprised when he had so much humor, and he's such a tragic character.
He really is. It's interesting because all the stuff from the that they go through in his backstory, it happens in the comics.
Yeah.
All of it's true. He has to bury Aunt May. He has the falling out with MJ.
Oh, it broke my heart.
And they've done all this in the comics, and so if you know all that and you have all that background, then the weight of those really hit a lot harder as he's going through it and just quickly recounting his backstory. But yeah, and then after I guess we'll probably come back to him plenty because he's a great character in this. But then we have Gwen Stacy, who
Gwen Stacy.
I would say, like I said to you in the theater, if we didn't have the Amazing Spider-Man movies, I don't think anyone would give a shit about Gwen Stacy.
Right.
And
Emma Stone,
I'll take it.
Yeah, no, Emma Stone brought like
Emma Stone basically is Gwen Stacy.
Yeah, she brought actual character to Gwen Stacy. When Gwen Stacy prior to this was just, oh, I'm here to die.
She's basically just like before Emma Stone, she was basically just the prelim Mary Jane. Like she was just there to cause conflict and die so that Peter had to go through that.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what Peter has to do, is constantly go through that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then they had in her universe, I don't know, again, if this is something that she does, that she has going on in her universe in the comics, but her backstory is she loses Peter Parker. And I think that is what happens in her comics.
Yeah.
Because I'm not super familiar with her comics, but yeah, I think it makes sense for the character. I like the way they played that out in here, and they didn't put too much into Gwen Stacy, which I appreciated, because they definitely could have leaned too much into it. And then we had, obviously Nicolas Cage as Spider-Man Noir.
I think
he has probably the best jokes in the whole movie.
Best jokes in the whole movie, for sure.
He has pretty much most of the good jokes in the movie, and they are...
I love it.
He's great. Out of the Spider-Man that we have coming in, it's Peter B. Parker. He's pretty much the secondary lead of the movie.
Yeah.
And Gwen Stacy, she shows up first, so we have a little bit more with her, and then the other three show up as at once. And the other three being Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Ham, and Penny Parker.
Yeah.
Out of those three, Spider-Man Noir sticks out most,
For sure.
both because he is basically just Spider-Man, but just noir.
Yeah, he's just like...
So we know what he does.
Edward G. Robinson type of character, you know?
Yeah, so you get him instantly, because he's very much just Peter Parker, but in noir. So you understand him, and then the other two, I feel like because they're so different from regular Spider-Man, there's kind of a bit of a learning curve for those two, and so you don't really get enough to understand them fully.
Right, and I'm not really sure if that was the point. I think the point was to have, of course, more Spider characters, and also have, like, I think another part of it is to introduce show how talented these animators are by implementing anime style of art with a Penny Parker into this unique animation style that they already created, and then you have the whole cartoon Peter Parker thing, which also melds weirdly enough seamlessly with the rest of the anime. It's weird.
Yeah, because again, like you were saying, you feel like you were watching real people, and so as I'm watching it, you almost expect it to look like a cartoon next to a real person, because these people seem so real.
Oh yeah.
But then because these people are actually animated, he fits in just fine.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because that's kind of what you can do with Spider-Man, where you never see the face.
Yeah.
You don't have to emote with that. You can emote with motion and that sort of thing. And that was another small detail that I liked from the death of the first Peter Parker. They had the little bit of the mask that was gone as he was talking to Miles as he was about to die. And
yeah, that was a nice throwback.
That was the one moment where he was able to emote, because if you had tried to do that dramatic scene with just the mask on, it wouldn't have worked. But you could see just enough to see one of his eyes and just like the little bit of his face around the eye, and that was enough that you could actually convey emotion with it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they did it. I have a feeling that they probably didn't at first, and then they tried to do it without, and then they realized that it doesn't work trying to do emotion through the mask.
Yeah.
There's a reason why in every good Spider-Man iteration, if there's something like going wrong, the mask comes off. Because that's how you emote as Spider-Man.
Well, that's how you know that, you know, shit's happen is
Yeah.
by showing the mask like half broken. Because I mean, we've had that implemented in the comics and the Sam Raimi movies, and it's a I don't want to say it's a Spider-Man trope because I really like it, but
Yeah.
you know,
You see, it's a product of seeing and not reading. Because
Right, yeah.
in the comic book, you can have thought bubbles that you can read and you can understand that this is in his head and you are understanding what he's thinking. But in any sort of like visual media, any sort of TV show, movie, that kind of thing, you can't really do that. And they do a little bit with the spider sense, which I thought was a clever way of implementing it, but
yeah.
you can't really see into what somebody is thinking in a movie or something like that.
Yeah.
Unless you can see their face and see what they're doing with it. You can sometimes get it out of the quality of the voice, but it was very important that they had that, I'd say.
I agree. Yeah.
And then one of the other villains we forgot, Prowler.
Prowler, yeah. Very.
And we
very
went into
important
this
character.
we went into this very differently from each other because I knew who Prowler was. I knew that Prowler was Miles's uncle, and so as soon as they introduced the uncle character, I expected it. Meanwhile, Jeremy, you did not.
Yeah, I did not. I went into the movie. I mean, I had heard about Prowler. I think I might have like came across him in a comic or something. But my friend was telling me after watching the movie, he was like, "Yeah, the Prowler seemed so familiar, but I didn't know exactly who he was. I thought I'd seen him from a video game or something." And it was a pleasant surprise to see him as Miles' uncle because that. And it was great that they had established a dynamic or you know, a relationship between the two early on, because then that makes that reveal all the more impactful. And God, I love the music that.
Oh, the music for Prowler. It's just so ominous, and it's very minimalistic, and it works so well, and I love it.
Yeah.
Like every time that he was in the scene and that music was playing, I was incredibly engaged with whatever was happening.
I felt just genuine dread when you could see Miles' invisible face.
Yeah. So I going into it knowing who the Prowler was, I immediately knew, well, this is what's going to happen. It's going to have that moment of, oh, I know who you are. I didn't want to know who you were because we're fighting and that kind of thing. And the reveal, I obviously saw it coming. You did not. And for both of us, it was still cool. Like,
Yeah.
I liked it in sort of an Easter egg way up until that point where I know that this is, and not necessarily everybody else does. Most people, this is a surprise. I like it because I'm seeing this, so when I'm watching it, I'm picking up on any little thing that might be a hint towards it, and I'm like, yep, there it is. And it's still cool even if you don't know. That's the way to do things, where
Exactly.
you have it connected to lore that people can know, so it can be fun for those people. And then at the same time, you have it in a way where you get the reveal. You don't have to have understood this before you went in, but if you didn't, you get a nice surprise, and if you did, then you get to see that play out, knowing what's going to happen. And some people may not like that. I found it like it was a very good experience. I found with that. I liked that quite a bit.
Yeah. I also like when you bring up the thing about, you know, picking up the details and the hints of who his uncle is and how he's the Prowler, because watching it the second time, I knew, knowing he was the Prowler, I did also try to look for those hints, and, you know, seeing him not answering his phone all the time and just kind of being away from his house. I mean, Miles even takes Peter B. Parker as an interrogation, like, I got some questions for you, and brings him to his uncle's apartment or whatever, and he's not there. And I think that this movie does a really good job of like showing its attention to detail by not just through the animation, but through the story and through the beats and through how it all just flows together in this weird multiverse story, which is kind of becoming like overused in movies and video games and stuff. But I think it does a really good job here of just being unique and being a story that needed to be told, especially to our generation.
Yeah, and I would say one of the things that I noticed now, it took me until now to pick it out. It was a very subtle hint, I think, but because they made it into a joke, which I thought also landed on its own, but landed on its when he climbs over the fence in the subway tunnels.
Yeah.
And he climbs over it like it's nothing. And why would he be able to do that?
Oh,
Yeah, and I had never put that together until
didn't
now.
even notice that.
And yeah, that makes a lot of sense why he would be able to just quickly climb over that fence,
Yeah.
because he's the Prowler.
Yeah.
And they go off of it very quickly, and they make it into a joke about Miles not being able to do it as well, but it works. That's why would he be able to do that? It's because he's the Prowler.
Because he's the Prowler, and it's because he's had training, because he's a hitman.
And that is not at all the kind of attention to detail that I would expect from Sony animation.
Right, and that's another thing. This is something I thought about after seeing the movie with Uncle Aaron, or Aaron Davis, is that, you know, in the comics, and he's criminal, you know, like he that's how he gets all this fancy schmancy stuff, is by, you know, engaging in illegal activities. And I think that's what his brother, who's Miles' dad, I think that's what he knows and what he suspects, but that's why he's kind of keeping himself distant, because Miles' dad is a cop. But, you know, I thought that was also another great detail, was, you know, the movie shows you very subtly, just by looking at his apartment, that he's well off, and he can pretty much go to a Subway in the middle of the night and, you know, spray paint with his nephew and still be financially stable. And I thought that was really cool detail.
Yeah, and then another thing that I just thought of, you had the moment where the dad is telling Miles that he doesn't want to end up like his uncle.
Yeah.
And it brings up the question of how much does the father actually know about what goes on? Because he talks, I believe, about how they were close when they were younger, right?
Yeah.
And then they grew apart, and
yeah, he said something like, yeah, your father and I used to do this all the time when they're doing that spray painting thing.
Uh-huh.
And he also says, what else does he say? I don't remember.
He says that they kind of grew apart when he became a cop. When the dad became a cop.
Right, and that's also another thing that, because that's what his dad is afraid of with Miles, is the whole growing apart thing. Because he believes that, I think he believes that Miles is leaning more towards his uncle than his own father.
And then it plays into the whole secrecy thing of Miles not telling him about that, so he's probably thinking he's into other stuff like his uncle would be.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's just a lot of subtlety, which again is not something I would expect from Sony Animated Pictures.
Exactly. Or a freaking Spider-Man animated movie.
Brought to you by the creators of the Emoji Movie.
Yeah, shout out to you, Avi Arad. You piece of shit. Okay, here we go. Now we're saving the best character for last. Well, there are more characters that we've.
He's a good character, though.
Yeah, we're saving. Wait, yeah, I'll let you introduce him.
All right, I think we're thinking the same one. The
We're thinking
dad.
the same one? Yeah, the dad, yeah.
He is a very good character. I found him very likable throughout the entire movie.
No, yeah.
And he's not there all the time, and there's not a whole lot with him. But he's always a presence in the movie, I feel like. Because it's always something that Miles is thinking about. You can tell he's important to Miles, and he's kind of trailing behind what's going on. And he's getting, you have the whole thing with, do you really hate Spider-Man? And yeah, he's an asshole. Why would I not hate Spider-Man? And then you see him reacting to the fact that later that night Spider-Man's dead.
Yeah.
And you have that moment, and then you have the moment where he's standing at Miles's door, and he hasn't seen Miles in a while. Like, that's when Miles has been kind of missing. And so you have him talking to Miles through the door. Doesn't even, well, he does know that Miles is there, but
Yeah.
Miles never responds because Miles is tied up in a chair.
Yeah.
But you have that moment where it's just him talking, and it's very good.
It's a very good moment, and God, I felt so bad for him.
Yeah.
Shout out to the motherly figures in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Rio Morales, she's great.
And Aunt May.
Aunt May, who is badass.
Yeah,
She's
I liked
really
what they
good
did with
character.
Aunt May because we've never had that.
Never had
on
that
screen.
Never. Aunt May has always been, especially in the Raimi movies. God,
Yeah.
she's always been like the. Oh, Peter, I love you," and it's like, oh well, she doesn't know that. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
But like, she's always been the plot piece character. You know. Oh,
She's the damsel in distress because she's
Right.
old and unable to do things for
right.
herself.
She's
but
elderly.
this one, of course, she's old because she's Aunt May.
Yeah.
And unless you're in the MCU,
Unless
she
you're
has
Martha
to be
Tomei.
old. So you have, she's obviously not the most physically fit person. She's not
Yeah.
jumping and running around with the Spider-Man, but she's there. She does her thing. She has her moments of
She's got to kick down the door moments.
yeah. She has that, and she has like the shed in the back of the house with like a sanctum. It's basically the Bat Cave.
With all the suits. Also, shout out to that Spider-Man PS4 suit. I saw you. That was really cool.
And they had like it was basically the Batmobile, but
Yeah.
Spider-Man themed,
Spider-Man
and I
cheap.
love that they had that.
Yeah.
And all the characters in this movie, with I would say the possible exception of like Penny Parker, who I felt like wasn't super utilized, had a lot to do in this one, and I think they all had quite a bit of a character built into them.
No.
I think I'm seeing. Wait, I think the Frankenstein guy. Yeah. So it's Tombstone. Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay, see, that's the thing. My first introduction to Tombstone was in the PS4 video game.
Oh,
Because-
he's the one who can turn people to stone, isn't he?
Yeah.
That's interesting how they didn't actually use that.
It's weird.
That's
yeah.
because that would have given it away to me who he was. But
Yeah.
yeah, because he can normally turn people to stone by touching
Yeah,
them.
Did he even have a line in the movie? I don't think
He
did.
had, I think he had like one or two. There was the moment where he was pointing guns at Doc Ock, and she
Yeah.
grabbed his neck, which I thought was funny because that's not gonna stop
He
him.
was like, "Okay, I'll shoot you." Yeah. And then we have. Oh well, now we're saving the best for last. We've got Miles Morales.
Yes, Miles Morales. Oh yeah, we didn't actually talk
Yeah.
about. That's who you were talking about, wasn't it?
Well, I was also talking about the dad, but
yeah, but
Miles Morales was, I think, the best character in the movie.
yeah, and I think he needed to be. I think
Yeah.
because that's most people. People know Miles Morales, and people they know who he is. They know that he's the Spider-Man from the other universe and that kind of thing. But this is most people's first like diving into his world and his
Exactly.
character, and he has many of the same powers of Spider-Man. He has, although a lot of difference in his personal life, because he has the family that's there, and he has the parents that are there in his life, and that's something that Peter never had. He has Aunt May, but that's pretty much all Peter's ever really had since becoming Spider-Man, and
Yeah.
that's not the case with Miles. So that opens up a whole new avenue for storytelling with that, and for personal connections there, which they play into incredibly well in this movie.
I agree. Miles.
And yeah, it's just he was so good.
He was so good.
Yeah.
I loved, like, also shout out to him being a Chance the Rapper fan. He was just so real. Like, seeing an animated character on screen that I actually thought was a real person was just kind of mind-blowing to me, because you see a lot of parallels with his story and Peter Parker's story, but he reminds us at the very end of the movie that, like, anybody can be Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Anybody can put on the mask. And I think that's the whole point, is that Miles became Spider-Man, Peter Parker became Spider-Man, Gwen Stacy became Spider-Woman. You know, like, anybody can be Spider-Man, and Miles shows that. And that's not to say that Miles is like us type of thing, because Miles is for sure his own character, because he has his own fears, his own desires, expectations of himself. That's another thing that's brought up in the movies, great expectations. And I think it's interesting because he's so conflicted with like himself and who he wants to be, and like what he wants to do with this spark that he has within himself. He doesn't want to do it with school, which is again weird and interesting, but like yeah,
I think it's an interesting thing when he says at the end, it's you can wear the mask, that kind of thing, and that is what Spider-Man is supposed to be. He's supposed to be the everyman who ends up with powers and what people would want to think they would do if they found themselves in that position. And thinking back through like the Marvel universe, most of the main characters, like the big heroes in that, don't really wear masks.
yeah,
Like they've had the whole secret identity thing. They went through all that. They've kind of been moving away from that, I feel like, ever since kind of the MCU and the I Am Iron Man at the end of the first movie, where they kind of did away with the whole, because Tony Stark was obviously a big one who he was the billionaire, but nobody knew he was Iron Man until Civil War.
Right. Yeah.
In the comics. And so I think it's interesting that you have Spider-Man he does wear the mask, so you can put yourself in his position. And then I thought it was interesting that most of the villains I can think of or a lot of the villains I can think of in Marvel also have the mask, which I think is weird because not many of the heroes do. And I guess it's kind of playing off the whole, you don't want to be people to know who you are if you're a villain. But I don't know. I feel like there's something intrinsically philosophical in there.
Yeah.
I can't quite put my finger on it, but I kind of like whatever sort of implications that may have.
No, yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to like the whole, if people know who I am, then they're going to know who my family are. They're going to know. That's why I wear the mask, is to protect people that I care about. And I think that would be a fear for everybody who became Spider-Man, is fear of endangerment of their loved ones.
Do we get that in the Sam Raimi trilogy, where it's very clear that he is hiding his face so that his family doesn't get caught up in it? Aunt May and
it's not clearly pointed out or anything.
Because I can't think of a time in any of the movies where it's exceptionally clear that that's why he wears the mask.
No.
And I feel like that's something that has a lot of potential and should be leaned into a little bit, because it's a very important part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that is kind of obvious, but it's also something that, because it's obvious, people are kind of shying away towards it, and I don't think that...
I think it's important, because your identity is really everything in that case, and I think there's a lot of potential for that sort of story. And I like the direction they went at the end here, where I wasn't sure whether or not he was going to like actively tell his dad that he was Spider-Man, and he didn't. I thought he might, but he didn't. And I like the secrecy of it. I like that he doesn't know, and that he's on good terms with Spider-Man, it seems like, but he doesn't know. Not at least for sure. Right.
And I think it definitely would have sucked if like if his dad found out, or didn't. Well, that's not what I mean. If he still hated Spider-Man at the end of the movie.
Yeah, I think it was very important for Miles to redeem Spider-Man in his dad's eyes, because that was kind of the whole start of it. And like you see them in the beginning, the dad's talking about Spider-Man, what an asshole, that kind of thing. And then you have Miles meeting Spider-Man and Spider-Man dying. Then you have the moment between them with before the dad finds out that Spider-Man has died. And then it's a lot between them is about Spider-Man and the way they feel about Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for Miles, obviously, if he wants to ever have his dad know what he's doing. It's important that his dad is not actively opposed to Spider-Man.
Right.
But yeah, if you have because they did the whole actively opposed to Spider-Man main character thing in Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And they had Gwen's dad who was actively against Spider-Man and that sort of thing.
It makes him promise to not.
Let's not talk
Yeah,
about
we're not
Amazing.
going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this good movie.
Yeah, let me think. What else what have we not touched on here? Because there's, first off, one thing that isn't exactly about this movie, but something that about Homecoming.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing Prowler in this one, I'm exceptionally excited for them to actually do something with Donald Glover as Prowler.
I'm so excited for Far From Home because I mean I love Donald Glover.
I don't know if
Homecoming.
Is he actually going to be in Far From Home? Have they said that yet?
I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the casting or anything,
Okay.
or the cast list, but like,
because
I hope so.
I feel like he's not. They're definitely not ready to bring Miles in for the MCU,
Yeah.
and I don't think they should yet. I think they should give it at least until Tom Holland has been doing this for 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. Then you can start to bring in Miles. But I think it would be interesting to set up Prowler before you bring in Miles, and then only later. That's the tether. Is Miles is. Then you find out that is his uncle.
Yeah.
And maybe you get to know Prowler as the villain in something else. Then you get to know the uncle when Miles is coming up.
Yeah.
So then you have you get the two sides, and then only after you learn both sides, then you find out they're the same person.
Ooh.
That would be the good way to do that. And I would love to see Donald Glover in there. That'd be so great.
Yeah, I'm excited for what they do.
Mm-hmm. And then you had something before I started talking.
Oh, I was just gonna talk about the spider sweatpants.
The spider sweatpants.
That was for sure my favorite costume in the movie.
That was pretty good. I liked it. They need to add that one to the PS4 game.
You see, that was the thing. Is like people were. I mean, they implemented that into the game, the Spider-Verse suit, but a lot of people were like, "Oh, come on, put in the sweatpants."
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh man, what else do we have? We have all kinds of Easter eggs in this movie.
There are lots of Easter
Lots
eggs
of
in the
references.
movie. And I'm sure there's many, many more than I even came close to getting.
No, yeah. I mean, the first real reference that we get is the Spider-Man the Raimi Spider-Man references first with Uncle Ben's "With great power comes great responsibility." That hit me hard. That was really good. And then we have the Spider-Man 2 train thing, and then we have
Oh yeah, they did do the train, didn't they?
Yeah.
And then they had the Spider-Man 3 dance,
The
which was great.
It's so good. I love that scene unironically. It's just so funny.
And then, of course, the end credit scene. You have another one, which is great.
Well, before we get into that, I want to talk about that Stan Lee cameo.
Stan Lee cameo is very good. Obviously, this is one of Stan Lee's last cameos, at least.
Yeah.
He's probably in Captain Marvel because they filmed that a while ago.
Yeah, Endgame
He's
was
probably
confirmed.
in Endgame, yeah. Endgame, I think Spider-Man Far From Home is... I think that's the last one that he got to film.
I believe that is his last one.
So we have a few more movies with him, but yeah, it was... They had the quotes from him at the end. They had him in the movie, of course, and...
Which stopped everybody's heart in the theater.
It's just... He was just such a good guy.
Yeah, just a genuine human being.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. All right, now we've got the end credits scene, which I have a funny story to tell. So, one of my friends that I saw this movie with, while the credits were going on, the whole time we were thinking, wow, it would have been incredible if this character had been implemented into the movie. It would have been better if they inserted this character in place of, the other three spider people that aren't really delved into, or just to take them out and then insert this character. But as we were talking and as the credits were ending and the post-credit scene started, we saw this character that we were talking about, who is Miguel O'Hara from Spider-Man 2099, and we freaked out. It was so exciting to see.
And then, obviously, that's probably going to be somewhere they go in the future with this, the animated series, the animated movies. And I'm excited to see where else they go with it, because 2099 will be really cool. I'm excited to see what they do with that.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, with the success of this movie, because it's done very well from what I've heard, at least. And they're going to make sequels. They're already in the process of making a sequel. And I'd like to see what they can do with this style. I would much prefer for Sony to drop their whole Spider-Verse live-action thing and focus on this, because this is distinct from the MCU. Everyone knows this is not the MCU, because when you release something like Venom, or you release something like The Amazing Spider-Man, which was during the MCU thing, people don't know. And you might be able to trick some people into going to see it, but then even if you do, people are going to be like, well, where was Iron Man? Where was Captain America?
Right.
And people are they understand it better now than they did back during Amazing Spider-Man. But this is so distinct, and this is very much something they've created on their own, this style of animation here that they're doing, and it's a good movie that they have here on their hands. Because Venom was entertaining, and it did exceptionally well.
But it was not a good movie.
But it wasn't a good movie. And they could take this style, and if they weren't greedy with it and didn't try to make instant Avengers out of it, they could turn this into their own thing, that they have their animated Spider-Man movies, and they let the rest of it get taken care of by people who know how to make good live-action movies.
Yeah.
And that would be better for them financially, I'm sure, because they could sell off the movie rights, the live-action movie rights back to Marvel. They don't have to deal with that. They don't have to worry about making the movies so that they don't lose the rights, and they don't have to worry about any of that. And they can just focus all of their Spider-Man just effort on these things. And that, I think, would be pretty much better for the fans, for the studios, for everybody.
Yeah, it would be better for everybody, except for one individual named Avi. I love Money Arad, because that's all he cares about, is just making money.
Yeah. It's disappointing.
Yeah.
I'll say that. It's disappointing that they feel the need to continue with live-action movies within the Spider-Man universe. And seeing what they can do with this only highlights more their ineptitude at making live-action Spider-Man movies. Because this is how Spider-Man should be. I would say this movie, as far as capturing what Spider-Man is just about on par with Homecoming. As far as capturing the character of Spider-Man and what he does and what he's about, and not getting caught up in the whole cinematic bullshit of, oh, we have to have these fight scenes here and they have to be this epic because otherwise people won't like it, and it has to have X number of explosions. And
ooh, yeah, that's another thing.
But this is character-driven, which is what Spider-Man's always been and what it needs to be.
Yeah, I gotta say, I think this movie's better than Homecoming.
You think so?
Because I recently watched Homecoming and love it. I think it's a great movie.
I very much enjoyed Homecoming. I haven't seen it in a while, but
I think that this movie does Spider-Man the best, as does the Spider-Man PS4 game, because both of those products, they do the character of Spider-Man so well and they implement all the themes and everything that he's about, you know. Great power, great responsibility, you know, getting back up after each blow, you know, all this stuff. And then they also implement the kind of intense action scenes that feel like weighty and like, like something, people can die, like somebody could die in this situation, and people have died in this movie, which is something I was surprised to see. They
did kill characters. They killed off the Prowler. They killed off the Uncle. Yeah. And then they killed off Spider-Man, which obviously they had to do for plot necessity.
Right. But still, it was... I love Chris Pine's Spider-Man.
Yeah. But, like, they took risks with it, which you kind of have to do with Spider-Man, because that's what his character is he loses things and he has to learn how to use his powers, because if any normal person ended up with powers, they would screw shit up.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to be Captain America, who is just this exemplary human being who does everything right, because
Yeah.
that's not how people are.
Right.
And Spider-Man is a real human being.
Anybody can be Spider-Man.
Exactly. And that all ties back to that idea, and that's how you do Spider-Man. And I think this was very, very true to character. Despite not even really knowing much about Miles Morales going into this, they captured... That's what I love about Spider-Man, and the fact that I think that's why when they were trying to do different versions of superheroes, Miles Morales is the one that stuck around and people actually liked. They tried a bunch of different other ones.
Yeah.
Riri Williams, nobody liked Riri Williams. They tried stuff like that, and they had, was it Sam Cho
Yeah.
for Hulk? And it just doesn't work, because those characters, those powers are those characters. And it's perfectly fine to have that. You can't really have another... You can have another Captain America. It's a mantle that can be passed, but you can't have another Steve Rogers.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's the thing, is with the Spider-Man thing, it's a set of ideals that Spider-Man kind of embodies. And it's the way that they overcome problems, and the way they face problems, and the way they deal with these moral issues. That's what Spider-Man is. And you can really put any real character as Spider-Man. And that's why I think that Miles Morales is the one that stuck around, and why he is the one that people latched onto. Because, again, you can be Spider-Man, because that's how it is. And it felt just as Spider-Man as any Peter Parker to me. And
yeah.
and it didn't, like, despite not knowing Spider-Man as Miles Morales yet before seeing this movie, except, knowing of him but not really being engrossed in it, it felt like Spider-Man. And that's what they managed to accomplish.
It was a great unifying movie.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you how giddy I felt and how much of a kid I felt again after seeing both Peter Parker and Miles Morales on the same screen together, fighting just together and being just this camaraderie that you can feel off the screen. It was great.
And I'm glad that they didn't, as cool as it would be to see both he and Peter B. Parker fight Kingpin at the end, I'm glad they didn't do it.
I know.
Because it was what Miles needed.
It's what he needed. It's what he needed to do.
And it would have been the money shot of the movie to have them fighting Kingpin together. And they know that, because they're Sony, and that's really all they care about is money.
Yeah, they're all about the dynamic hero fighting thing. And,
exactly. And
melding universes together.
And it could have been so much of a more dynamic fight scene if they'd had both, and they had both of them fighting Kingpin, and it was intense in that sort of way. But they took Peter B. Parker out of the equation. They had Miles take him out of the equation, which I think was also just as important.
That was great.
It was him that sent him back to his own universe. He took the moment to make Peter understand why he had to do that. He let him go, and then he had to take the fight. And the whole thing where he had to keep getting up, they kept saying that throughout the movie. And then in that moment, it is his dad who's telling him that he has to get up.
Yeah.
And again, that's a dynamic you can't have with Peter Parker, because his dad isn't there.
Yeah.
And that is what makes Miles Morales unique, is that connection there that he has with his family. And they leaned into that like they needed to.
Yeah.
They did pretty much everything right with this.
Yeah.
That's my biggest takeaway from this movie, is they did it right. And I don't know... They don't do that very often.
Especially Sony.
Especially Sony. And again, like, we enjoyed Venom. We thought it was pretty true to the character.
Yeah, yeah.
But this is what you do. You take a character like this that people can relate to, and you put them in your own style, and you make your own story, but you keep the heart of the character, and that's what they did with this movie.
Yeah, this movie has so much heart, and it's just a very feel-good movie. Like, because, I mean, that's what Spider-Man is. You watch Spider-Man, you see him be Spider-Man, and then you think, I want to be Spider-Man, because I want to be that person that can be, that one average person who can take up the mantle, put on the mask, and, do what he loves doing, which is helping people. And yeah, it's so good.
Yeah. I think just the main thing, go see it.
Yeah, go see it. Like,
it's so good. And I think it's a good one for theaters.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one you necessarily need to see in theaters. I think it would be just as good on a small screen, but the seeing the animation and seeing it on the big screen, and there are some good moments in there that are good on the big screen, but at some point see this movie, because it's Miles Morales how it should be, and
Spider-Man how it should be.
Spider-Man how it should be, and you're probably not going to see Miles Morales in the MCU, at least for a long time, if they do it right. And this is a good alternative. I would be perfectly happy to see this continue, and to see Miles Morales become a household name out of this franchise.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to see.
And I think it could happen.
I can't wait to see the Miles Morales like merch and stuff. It's gonna be, yeah. I mean, there was a point, like just a couple years ago, where I saw a post somewhere, and it was like, who do you prefer? Do you prefer Peter Parker or Miles Morales? I was like, I don't even remember Miles Morales. What are you talking about? Fuck out of here. But now I'm seeing this great character that I've been missing out on, and it just makes me happy. It's like I'm discovering something new.
Yeah.
And this is what this movie does well, is give you something new, but also give you something familiar that you know. This is a movie, I feel like this movie has every Spider-Man that everyone is used to. Like, they have the Spider-Man that my parents would be used to. They have the Spider-Man that I'm used to. They have the Spider-Man that, my uncle would be used to, the 60s Spider-Man. It's got something for everybody.
Yeah, it is a good family movie. It's a good movie just to take anyone. It's a good movie to take somebody who, if you know somebody who hasn't seen Spider-Man,
oh my god,
this gives them what Spider-Man is.
Yeah.
And if they would be on board with Spider-Man, they would be on board with this movie.
Oh, yeah. This is a movie for everybody. Go see it. Go
Absolutely.
watch it twice. Watch it 3 times.
Yeah.
That's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. You said it was better the second time.
Better the second time. I can't wait to see how it is the third time.
All right. Anything else that you wanted to touch on about it?
That's all I wanted to say.
Thwip.
The thwipping in the movie is good too.
The thwipping is good. I like the sound effects and how they're actually shown on screen, and they have there's just so much. There's too much to actually say about the style of this movie.
Yeah.
And that alone would be a reason to watch it. And then you add everything else on top of it, and there is absolutely no reason that everyone should not see this movie.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, I think we've concluded plenty of times before, but see the movie.
Yep.
Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you for listening.
As well. And we will see you back again eventually with Harry Potter.
Yeah, we're gonna try.
Potter.
We're gonna try that.
Second one.
We might.
I think I found a DVD player, so we might have a chance.
We might even talk about Bird Box too.
Yeah, we might see Bird Box. We'll see about that.
We're gonna get around to that. Get to the bottom of that nonsense.
All right. Well, we will see you again eventually. Hopefully
Bye.
sooner than later.